welcome to Disruptive Leaders in Tech. I am joined here today by Ben Dundee. Ben has recently moved to CVS Health. You're head of data science for a particular area. What's your role there, Ben?
So I'm a director in the growth organization. So help to drive growth for CVS Pharmacy through the retail pharmacy. Yeah. You might have interactions with some of my teams where some of the teams that send you text messages when you don't pick up your prescriptions. So yeah, so we have we have kind of we're part of CVS, like from the tech organization that interacts with customers pretty regularly. So.
Well, that was going to be one thing I brought up with you, because you were at RetailMeNot, you were at Expedia, then you went to Jiffyshirts for a couple of years?
Yeah, Jiffyshirts.
And then now CVS. So a lot of your career and experience has been, I guess, consumer and customer centric.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's what I think for me. I really in tech generally, I prefer the customer facing roles, the customer facing problems. I think that at the end of the day, that's where kind of the rubber hits the road. Like you can have great models and you can have great business models and great, spend all your days building an AI, but at the end of the day, if customers don't care, like you're going to fail. So I think for me that's always been the key to the roles that I've really gravitated towards, I've really appreciated, have been sort of the more customer-facing ones.
Awesome. My next question was was that like a conscious thought and a preference that you kind of want to go down your career path? Because
I kind of fell into it, to be honest. I came from graduate school, came from academic route, and I started in quantitative finance. So I was a quant, valuing credit derivatives. I think when I moved to tech and I got laid off from the company I was working at, moved to Austin in 2012, and I think I fell into customer-facing tech, and I think that was it was kind of a happy accident. And but I think really, in the roles that I've really appreciated have been the ones with sort of direct customer exposure.
Yeah, and I think that it's good to be able to take that advantage of that. And it's funny that you went from like that quant role where it is numbers, and now you're like purely like customer human focused. It's such a difference to use data science.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it's there's some customer problems that need solutions, and that's like at the end of the day, we're here to help people solve things, help people solve problems, and for me, like building things to sort of support that it's always been sort of in the service of the end user that you build stuff, and those have been the types of problems and stuff that I just really love solving.
Perfect. And then I gave you a little bit of a heads up on this, but starting off every podcast with this question. I think when you and I first met and talked about the podcast and what the audience was going to be, I said to you, like, it's going to be for anyone on a career journey within not just data, but in technology in general. And so I think hearing from people like yourself who have kind of been through the ringer, I'm sure, a couple of times, you've been up and down on a career path roller coaster, and now you're obviously a well-respected executive leader within the industry. I think even peers of yours, people getting started in their career and people in the middle are going to love to hear a sort of answer of this question. But if you today, Ben Dundee today, could go back to your day one self and give yourself one piece of career advice, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I thought about this. I want to answer the question in like two parts. So the first part is like if I could go back and talk to myself at the end of after I came out of college, right before I went into graduate school, and I think when I went into graduate school, I was very, I was very conceited about the problems I wanted to solve. It's like if I wasn't working on like the fundamental building blocks of nature, I did, particle physics and theory and all that stuff. If I wasn't working on kind of the fundamental building blocks of nature, then the problems just weren't worth solving. And I think for me, that kind of, it put me in a direction. I certainly don't regret any. I don't regret any of the choices I made. I've had a tremendous fortune to kind of do exactly what I've been interested in for my lifetime. And so I was really interested in it, but I think it did kind of limit my focus in terms of like the types of problems that I could solve. There's interesting problems everywhere. And I think that's the point that I would have wanted myself to understand, is that it doesn't have to be, you know, in this little corner of theoretical math and physics that where all the interesting problems are. There's interesting problems everywhere in the world, and you just have to kind of open your eyes a little bit and see like where the interesting problems are. And I would say the other sort of thing that I think I learned late in my graduate school career, but that I wish I would have known a whole lot earlier is it, and regardless of where you go, whether you go to graduate school or whether you take, you know, entry-level position, you should be an omnivore when it comes to information. Like, you definitely need to learn the things that, you know, are in front of you, and you need to master the skills that are set in front of you, whether it's an educational program, whether it's a job description, you know, whether you join, you know, a volunteer organization. You have to be able to master the stuff that's in front of you. But at some point, and that point should come, and you should make yourself uncomfortable. That place should come a little bit sooner than you're ready for, is that you should start being very broad about the stuff that you're interested in and learning about. You know, at the end of the day, you're never going to grow your career. You're never going to grow your influence in graduate school and academia. You're never going to drive the volunteer organization to be a better organization by doing the thing that you do really, really well. The way that you can make an impact in any organization is to understand, you know, the stuff that's in front of you, but then to understand how that stuff in front of you fits into kind of the bigger patchwork that's around you. And if you can frame the stuff that you're doing in terms of the way that it helps the organization accomplish what that organization is trying to accomplish, that's kind of if there's any secret sauce to kind of like moving your career forward, like that's it, I think. I will say, like, you know, once I started my career probably 10 years later than everybody else here did. But once I really kind of got into a job, like a real world job, I would say the one piece of advice that I wish I would have had sooner is, and I will say I've had this piece of advice about marriage. I would not recommend it for marriage. I would definitely recommend it for your career. You should always beg for forgiveness instead of ask permission. You should always beg for forgiveness instead of ask for permission. And you know, I would say that a lot of the big steps forward in my career that I've made have been because I've seen a need to do something, find a way to do it in a way that isn't, you know, you don't want to step on toes, you don't want to get in everybody's way, but find a way to accomplish it. You don't have to ask for permission for those sorts of things, you know, and it's better to, especially early in your career, it's better to get your hand slapped for like a misstep that you made, you know, and where the trade-off is that you could move something forward significantly, like for yourself and for the organization that you're part of. And I'd say, like, kind of pursuant to that is you have to recognize that all of this stuff was built by people who are like about as smart as you are, you know. Rules are just made up by other people, and those people have some information. They use that information to think like, oh, we need this rule or we need this process. It doesn't mean that that's like carved in stone. And the person who put that on paper in the first place, like, you know, that person is probably about as smart as you are, you know, and you should, you know, maybe they have more experience, maybe they have less, but you should just keep in mind that, you know, all this stuff is made up and we're just all making it up and trying to make it work, you know.
I say stuff like that to my fiance all the time. She at work, I think everyone's got the pros and cons and things, and she'll overthink kind of getting a meeting booked in with someone at work or something like that. And I'm just like, just got to remember, like, they might be thinking the exact same thing. We're all humans out here, kind of winging it. Like, no one's a total expert at the field that they do. So
exactly. Like, some of us have been doing it for longer, but you know, it just means we have like less hair than other people. You know?
Yeah. I'm going down that path now. But great, and then a great bit of small marriage advice in the middle of that as well.
I'll leave that to the readers, to the viewers, to sort of decide for themselves whether that's good advice for their marriage or not. I can't recommend it.
I'm getting married myself this summer, so I'm going to bear it in mind. I'll write that one down.
Yeah, fair enough. I have some other ones too. Like, never give away your babysitter's phone number. Like, don't.
I guess something you touched on there as well is, I guess it ties in with the ask for forgiveness, and kind of go out there and try and get it done, and, you know, I guess prove the rewards and work with the business side in mind. And one thing, when I speak to data scientists that are, you know, 3 to 5 years experience, they're transitioning into that senior data scientist, they want to become that lead data scientist, that type of role. I often speak to data scientists on a daily basis who are asking for advice on, like, what is it that kind of gets me to that next step? Like, you know, you can be the best hands-on person ever, but I always advise it's the business acumen that starts to separate you, and understanding how it can be applied. Like, data science is obviously evolving daily, and it's being used for different case studies every day in business and then from every angle. So that's the biggest piece of advice I get is like learn why this is important for the business. And then the second piece to follow that up would be learn how to articulate that to the business.
Absolutely.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. It kind of brings us on to that first topic of that data, AI, and executives. So there could be two sides to this. There's data AI executives, kind of like yourself and many of your peers, but you're also sat at a table with non-technical executives probably quite frequently. So how have you kind of navigated that highway? Yes, those hurdles that come with, you want to go down this path, you need X funding to buy this, to try this, to get the headcount for this. And you're trying to explain that to people that don't understand the data science, the machine learning, the tech in general, as much as you obviously do at the table. So how's that journey been for you, and how have you navigated those hurdles?
Yeah, I think I got a good piece going back to graduate school again. I got a good piece of advice from one of the professors that I worked with, and I was writing a paper, and he read the first draft, and he said, "Ben, nobody wants to read your research notes." And I think that it's to reframe that, maybe in a slightly different context. The things that you think are interesting aren't the things that the executives think are interesting, and you have to kind of really get a true sense of that early in your career. And I think even it's early in my career, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I totally get it," but I didn't really get it. Like, you really have to have a deep sense of that look, all of the ways that you evaluate your models, you're going to go to an executive and say like, "Oh, my model's so good because of X." Like, at the end of the day, if X doesn't have a dollar sign in front of it, if X doesn't have some sort of customer facing implication in front of it, if X doesn't have a business facing result in front of it, at the end of the day, it's like, I congratulations on improving your F score, but how does this translate to dollars? And I think that for me I think for me, like I've been a very good individual contributor. I was never, the best. I think what I was really, really good at is helping people realize like, this is like, look, we're going to go and do all this crazy coding and multiple, like, recombinant this and recurrent this and, this model and this model. But at the end of the day, like all of that crank turning that we're going to do, this is going to be the end implication for the business. Like the delivery times are going to get quicker, or we'll be able to trade off these two things in an intelligent way such that we preserve the customer experience. And I think, turning that corner. So to go back to something that I said a few minutes ago, understanding how the thing that you're doing fits into the broader plans of the organization, the broader trajectories and stuff, is kind of instrumental there. And then, I would say focusing on the business facing implications of what you're doing. And that's the hard part. And I think especially early in your career, it's really, really hard. And I think it's a challenge for someone who doesn't have the context of, 3 to 5 years of experience, seeing the business make wrong decisions and miss quarterly goals and make a, seemingly unrelated decision, all of a sudden knock things out of the park and you don't have kind of that context. So you can understand like, okay, this is what the organization is trying to accomplish, and this is how I can fit into that. I think for me, it's like, it's that sort of understanding the context, understanding the environment that you're operating in, and then figuring out like, what are the motivations? Like, what are the things that this person cares about? This person is always going to care about margin. So if I bring something to them, I want to really focus on like the operating costs that we're going to save. And like, this organization really cares about customer engagement, and they're okay with spending a little bit more money as long as they drive better customer engagement. How do they measure that? What does that mean? What are the ways that we can affect that for this particular process or model that we want to deploy? How does that drive the thing that they really care about that ends up driving like the customer experience? And you have to really connect those dots for people. You can't just sort of lay the information out there and pull your hair out because they're not taking your advice,
And I think that as long as you if you identify it, and you can, I guess it kind of goes back to what I just said, but like the articulation side of it as well. Like obviously I've met with you a few times and things, and you are a great speaker, and you're probably very well practiced in that, and having to speak that to different executives. But I think it's like the identification of it. With that though, you mentioned like understanding how it affects the bottom line.
Yeah.
I've spoken to a couple of people on this before, and The last podcast episode I recorded was with a chief data officer called Nate Rakiewicz, and he thinks that you can certainly, like, you can identify what the ROI should be on a particular project and things. And I spoke to other data leaders, and it's just like, it's one of those things where you can't literally write, here's how it affects the bottom line, but you can say, we can do some research, we can do some tests and things that might fail here, but then we get one step closer to finding out we need to go in this direction and things like that. But it's very hard to, I guess that's the hurdle as well, right? Is kind of going back to that, is you have to convince whoever is in charge of the purse strings, the CFO, the CIO, whoever you're reporting into, I need X amount of dollars. I might get it wrong here, but I'll be one step closer to figuring it out as I go down the path. And that's one thing that me and Nate spoke about last episode. But what's your thoughts on that?
I think so. I mean, that's a place that you get to, right? Like, you have to build within an organization. You have some capital when you join an organization where you can come and say, oh, here's this thing we're not doing. I've seen it work before. Let's see if it works here, right? You have a lot of capital at the beginning of your job, but then, maybe that thing works, maybe it doesn't. You got to build that capital up again. And the way that you build the capital up again is, you don't go and say, oh, we need a whole new department to do this whole thing, and it's going to be a multi-million-dollar investment over these many years. You got to kind of start smaller than that, right? Like, you got to that's a place that you get to. It's a credibility that you build over time in the organization. Yeah. I think, to the other point about not being able to write down, a precise number with decimal points about ROI. I think that's definitely true. And I think that's where your credibility in the organization comes in. Yeah. I will say, though, that there's lots of places where you can sort of see, all right, I can ballpark estimate this. I can, I can get, the people in the finance department do it all the time, and so I think, you got to kind of learn how to play that game a little bit. And I think there are times where you definitely can put sort of dollar values on initiatives. Yeah. That's based on experience that you have. That's based on sort of understanding how things generally work in the org. But, to come in and see, like, I can see conversion in this channel. We're spending, let me think of a good example. You can go and look at conversion funnels, for example, and you can always say, like, okay, I see, there's clear places for optimization in this funnel. And look, I think I can move this number 10%, but if I can move it 10%, this is where we'll get. But, then you can obviously graduate there. So I think you kind of build your credibility over time with that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I think obviously, for sure. I think within sort of any career path, you've got to prove yourself first before you kind of come in like a bull in a china shop to a new organization. Unless obviously you do have some sort of notorious sort of reputation that precedes you, and they know what they're getting. But I think, like you say, you've got to earn that respect and earn that trust and earn that relationship with those leaders.
Yeah.
Sorry, you gonna say something?
No, sorry.
No, so I guess that slightly touches on kind of the next topic I wanted to come up with you. There's a lot of reputation, but not necessarily reputation internally, but externally, and that's like networking and building a brand for yourself as a leader or as someone just in the industry. You see a lot of people in the data science analytics space of all levels with some huge followings and things on LinkedIn. And then obviously a lot of it as a leader, you're going to conferences, you're going to presentations, you're giving presentations. And then also, there's that LinkedIn presence as well. One of the reasons I wanted to bring this up with you was I know that I would say you're quite active on LinkedIn sometimes. Is that fair?
Yeah, I haven't been, not so much this year. I need to get back on the horse. I took January off, but I do need to get back on the horse. But yeah. Uh-huh.
So that's obviously the fact that is something you've done and probably going to continue doing. You obviously see the value of having that brand and having that network within the industry. But what advice would you be, and what's the main reasons you would say is why it's worth having such a good brand and network, and how do people go about
that? So I'd say a couple of reasons. I think so the first thing is, like, when it comes to like why you would want to build an audience, I think for me, it started a couple years ago because I wanted to be able to, I know you're a recruiter. I wanted to be able to not have to pay recruiters for entry-level positions.
Well, we have to end the podcast there.
Yeah, you can edit that one out. But no, I think for me, it was really about building a network of early career professionals so that, when I did have roles to post, I could go out and easily post roles and say, look, here's these positions in the organization, and then have kind of like an easy pipeline for talent. So for me, it was kind of it started out as kind of a lead gen thing. I think, my role at Jiffy ended in the summer. I took a couple months off. I think for me there over the summer, LinkedIn for me was really kind of a place to collect a lot of thoughts that I had. And, it was, I feel like I have, I have a bunch of ideas that I like feedback on. And so it was a good way for me to kind of get good feedback on stuff. And I really appreciated that. I think for me, it's just kind of fun too. I enjoy kind of sharing some of the things that I've learned, and I enjoy interacting with people. And, like I said, it definitely has led to, certain opportunities I don't think I would have had otherwise. I think, especially, one of the tips that I started giving people who are looking for jobs is, at the end of the day, recruiters spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and they're scrolling through their feeds all day long, and they got this whole list of jobs. And if you keep showing up there as like someone who's always in the LinkedIn feed, then that recruiter is thinking like, oh, I have all these open roles. Maybe this person is someone I want to talk to. And, to be honest, I've had the same thoughts. I've definitely known people on LinkedIn, just from LinkedIn relationships based on their posts and stuff, and made recommendations for them for positions inside an organization that I was working in. So I definitely see it as for me, it's definitely a marketing activity, but very much one that I appreciate engaging with the platform.
I think I mean, definitely from a recruitment standpoint, you touched on both sides of the coin there. One is yourself as a sort of candidate in the market looking for new opportunities when those times kind of come along in your career. 100%. I think that's an amazing kind of way to use that tool and use that branding, because especially the past like 6 months where you've seen all these layoffs, like you could be the most talented person in the world, but all of a sudden you're surrounded by more competitive, equally as good talent as yourself, and having that brand might be the separating factor between you and the next person. And then obviously it's painful to hear, but not paying recruiters, but we get it. Like we're fully understanding, like we're there to add value on the roles that are like tough to fill and stuff, but and then with you, obviously in your case, you build that brand and you've got that network on LinkedIn, and obviously great. Like it makes no sense to kind of use those agencies or use those recruitment partners, because you've got that network and you've taken the time to do that. And then but that does take time, obviously, right? You have to invest that time and put yourself out there and stuff. So which not everyone kind of goes out and does that, but I would recommend. I mean, my boss I would recommend to anybody in this field at least have some sort of reputation and presence on LinkedIn and build some sort of network. And even if you just accept data scientists that are requesting to connect with you and things, the more connections and network you have, the more people. You can just put one status up, put no recruiters in the title, and you might get 20 people. It only takes one person to fill that one role. So
no, exactly. And those are, you typically get paid a recruitment bonus too. So like you can definitely monetize it. I think the other thing too that's really advantageous about it, I think, is you got to kind of find your voice. Everyone has like their own. There's a bunch of ingredients that make us all, and those ingredients are different, like for everybody. And like those ingredients give you kind of a unique perspective and a unique voice. And I think it's a good way to practice, being comfortable in your communication style, which, as we said a couple minutes ago, is like so important down the road, is to understand what's the best way for me to communicate. Like, how do I naturally communicate as a person? Like LinkedIn, as a content platform, just gives a ton of opportunity for that.
Yeah, it's something certainly the past 3-4 months. I mean, I'm not, I'm in the data science space, I would say, but I'm not like I'm like, I see, I'm kind of looking in through a glass, but I get to interact with, people like yourself on a daily basis, and and people that are kind of joining teams like yours on a daily basis and things. And so it's something I've been trying to do as well, is like expand my network and connections and stuff just in the market, because it's very opportunistic. It's probably the number one reason why you would do that. How about conferences? Is that stuff that you're interested in, speaking at conferences, giving, attending conferences just to network in general, or is that something you don't tend to do?
I think the last conference I went to was in October of 2019. So, we've all been shut down from conferences for a little while. Yeah. I haven't, when I was working at Jiffy, it was a very small organization. We didn't spend a lot of time, going to conferences. There was a, I think for me, the conferences I have been to that have been great have been the really the smaller, the more dedicated ones. I went to the, what was it? It was, for people doing ranking in 2019. I went to that conference, but it was sort of the more academically tracked one. But I made like a ton of great contacts in the field, like the academic search community and academic ranking community and stuff, which have been really interesting. I went to there's a conference in the US called Haystack. It's also in Berlin as well, but another search focused conference. And I like I said, I think those conferences that you go to that are like super super tight. What do you say? Like the conferences that you go to that are very focused. I think those, especially like if you're in a specific field, like find the conferences that are focused, and those to me have been the best chances to build relationships. Really, if you go to some place, and I've been to certainly some pretty big conferences, and it's kind of hard to get someone to talk to you, especially if there's someone who's kind of a more senior in the field than you are, and you really want to have a conversation with them. Going to like a 10,000 or 20,000 person conference, you're never going to get FaceTime with that person. But if you're at a conference with 100 people or 200 people or so, then all of a sudden grabbing a drink and like sliding up to that person at the the conference banquet, it's much more possible. So I tend to opt for smaller conferences when I go. I haven't been to a lot of conferences recently though. So.
Did you I know you're not in Austin anymore, but did you attend Data Day whilst you were in Austin?
Yeah.
I always found that was a good number of people. It was never huge, but it was great.
I think I really loved the Data Day in Texas because it was mostly local people. So it was a really great place for, you go to all the networking events and stuff. And, I haven't been to a lot of networking events that happen after 6 o'clock since I had kids. And so, there's that crowd who typically falls out a lot of the happy hour mixers and stuff that you do for networking. But you go to like a local conference like that where, like it's, $300 and the company's going to pay it. And I just have to drive downtown 2 days this week or something. Those are, I think those are other good opportunities as well, especially to have a good overlap with kind of like the local people who you may not meet out and about as often.
Yeah. Perfect. And then obviously you're, like we've touched on a couple of times now, but you're obviously one of the big leaders within the space. And you touched on, you've recruited, you've built teams, you've ran teams and things. So when you've kind of leveraged your network and everything like that, you've built your team and then you're obviously recruiting, especially someone like yourself who's very intelligent and very experienced within the field, and especially as I guess CVS would be a great, because you just transitioned there, but CVS obviously their talent bar is very high, and so I know Expedia's talent bar is very, very high. And things. So these companies that you've worked with, obviously you're recruiting the best of the best, the super intelligent people around you, and you might be the most experienced and lead of that team. I'm sure sometimes you get someone who comes along who they're a talent, they're a phenomenon, they're just super, they just kind of pick things up quicker than everyone else. Like how do you handle that, especially in that space? Because because at the end of the day, it's like how good as a data science you are, and if you understand the business side as well, like you've got the longevity, and that's kind of what you got to in your career. And I guess this applies to many other industries and careers, not just data. But how have you kind of handled that battle with the talented few around you, or many around you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say here. I think the way that I view I've used this, I think I've even used this analogy today. I use this analogy a lot. The way I view my role as a manager is like you go to see a band, right? And you I don't know, $100, $200 you pay to get into the place, and you pay to see the band. You don't pay to see the band's manager, right?
Yeah.
You're not there to see, the guy in the suit and ties. You're there to see the people playing guitar.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm not the person singing on stage, right? I'm the person who's running around in the background, like screaming about having the right kind of M&Ms and the right kind of bottled water, and to make sure that like the dressing room is like this temperature. Like that's my job. And I'm not a guitar player. I'm not the person playing the guitar. You got to know like when the guitar player's phoning it in, so you can have that conversation with it. But like you're at the end of the day, I'm not the one up there on stage playing guitar. And I think, if I frame it like that, and we'll always have this conversation with the people on my team, is that like, look, I'm out of the business of optimizing models. I can go and build it. I've been in SQL and Python for 10 years. Like I totally could, but it's not my time to do that anymore. It's your time to do it. You're the star. And my role in this relationship is to make sure that you have like the right kind of bottled water, that you have the right color M&Ms. Like my role is to make sure that you have the barriers eliminated from you. My goal, like for me, what I'm trying to do is make sure you have the right gigs booked, right? You have the things that are ahead of you that make you interested to go and attack them. And so to me, it's especially when you have a high performing employee, it's almost, it's more challenging because, there's a lot of, you have like you have the playbook for your employees that are, kind of average, and you say like, okay, well, this quarter, we're going to move this ahead a little bit. And you kind of get to the place where I don't know, I don't want to say how to say it. You kind of get to the place where understanding how to manage like average talent, you get a lot of that. So you get to pretty good at managing kind of the average talent. The people who are really good, like in some ways they're more challenging to manage. Some ways they're less challenging to manage. You don't have to have you don't have to get down in the details as often. You don't have to go and dive into their work and check the calculations and make sure they're right. But you do have to kind of solve like the organizational barriers. Like this person is doing the work of this team over there, and he's going to obviate it if we're not careful. And so there's bigger like organizational level challenges that you have to handle for that person. But really, at the end of the day, the goal is that you're like you're the person curling. Like there's the sport curling. Like there's the person with the broom. As a manager, you're the person with the broom. Like you got to make sure that the path is cleared for that that rock.
But just a quick question then on that, just purely out of curiosity and from someone who's not a part of a data science team sort of directly or anything, but when doing that, so you go to the table and you're talking to your peers, the other leaders across like the technology, the IT, the engineering and stuff, or whether it's the CTO, CIO, is it like do you have, as a good leader, do you have to make sure that the person who's doing like the top work on the team are getting their flowers at that table, where you're bringing up like, look, we set this project out and so absolutely killed it. They went away, they came back to me in 24 hours and they nailed it, or something like that. Like for example, that's just a very 101 way of thinking about how it works. But is that something that you kind of go out your way to do, or because I assume people need to get that reputation themselves to be able to and stuff like that?
No, I think, I mean, the best thing you can do with credit is give it away. And I think, you're never, as a leader, you shouldn't be, I think, concerned with the fact that the people below you are doing great stuff. And I think that, I'm, always super happy to push credit down as much as possible. You pull blame up and you push credit down, right? And I think making sure that, just having that as a policy just across the board, like, if that person deserves a seat at that table, then absolutely bring that. So I think just generally for credit, like you always want to push credit down. For me, that's been a general, like I think that's always served me well.
Yeah, and it's something I think, any manager or any leader in any industry would surely hopefully apply on a daily basis, or certainly can take that advice on board anyway. It's just, I was just curious. It just kind of came to me, that question, because data science space, I'm not sure exactly how it works kind of internally with that career progression. I obviously see people get progress in their career, but you don't know if it's just tied to years experience or tied to they killed this project time and time again.
Yeah, I think, the career progression inside data science can be tricky. Like, I think if you get really, really good people, sometimes they leave and start their own thing, So I think career progression inside data science can be a little bit tricky here and there. I think it's always, you never want to assume anything, especially when you're talking to the tech side of the organization, because, it could be
yeah.
So.
Cool. Well, and the last thing I wanted to do, just kind of wrap up the discussion. It's been amazing speaking with you.
Yeah.
I know you and I have met a couple of times and spoke a number of times before, but yeah, it's great to get the opportunity to pick your brain, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this. But I just wanted to kind of wrap up you. So you obviously moved to CVS. You're not, I wouldn't say you're brand new, but you've been there. You're kind of
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months. How's that transition been going, and how's it kind of compared to the stuff you've worked on before, and how excited are you to move forward with some of the projects you've got going?
I think it's really exciting. So I think I made a conscious choice, and I interviewed a lot in September, in August and September. I interviewed a lot. I think there was tons of opportunities that I looked really, really closely at, and out of all the stuff that was kind of in front of me, I picked the role at CVS because there was a lot of technical leadership opportunities that I looked really closely at, and I think more head of data, senior director data, head of data science sort of stuff roles. I think for me, they were all really, really interesting, but it was sort of moving further along kind of like the technical leadership path. I think the thing that I'm excited about at CVS, and the thing that the reason that I took the job is it's more of a like strategic leadership position, more of a business leadership position. And so really, the for me, I think it's just a point in my career where I was ready to kind of make a transition from, sort of the CTO vertical to some other part of the organization. And I think, and I think for me, that's what's really exciting, is that, this is healthcare is a place that's highly regulated, highly constrained. Retail pharmacy is a place that's ultra competitive. There's a lot of dynamics in this market, in this sector of the economy that I've just not been exposed to before. I think from a more fundamental perspective, I've always been interested in healthcare because, everybody has to interact with the healthcare at some point. And so if you make healthcare a little bit better, then you make things a little bit better for everybody. And so I think for me, that's always been really, really appealing. And so I think for me, it was just the right time to switch fields and to sort of slightly alter my career path and focus more on the strategic route. So super excited about CVS. It's a really great team. The part of the organization I'm in is in sort of retail pharmacy growth. So it's trying to drive growth in a place where, our margins are shrinking. You can read the 10Ks and see that, you can see the competitive environment gets tighter and tighter every year. And so, I'm super excited to learn about sort of strategy and execution in this company.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned this to you before, but I've interacted with a lot of people over at CVS, especially in the data science stuff team, and like everyone's always super polite, super friendly, super intelligent, and like professional things. So awesome. I was excited to see that you landed there, and I'm excited to watch your career grow there and the next few years.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.